am an internal medicine doctor specializing in primary care.
Hello, my name is Dr. Nikita Dean. I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist. I'm currently doing a global health fellowship and I'm completing my second year.
Hi, my name is Orrianne Morrison. I'm a third-year medical student at Rush Medical College, and we are here with Gibraltar Medical, dedicated to building communities.
So, how has the journey been? I know you're a third-year medical student. Nikita is a fellow, and I'm currently working as an attending. So, how has your journey been navigating while Black as a medical professional?
Thank you for that question. If I had to sum that up, I would say it's been a combination of challenging and very eye-opening. I feel like there was a lot I didn't know when I started on this journey in terms of just what steps to take, and I really leaned on mentors, along the way. But I also, as exciting as the journey was to just embark on, I've also found myself really at some points surprised or disappointed by some of the things that I encountered along the way. I think going to an undergraduate school like Spelman, where it's a cocoon and you have people who look like you, and coming out of that very safe and kind of nurturing environment into a place where people question whether or not you belong and if you deserve to be there, can sometimes, one, be jarring coming from that setting, but also cause you to question yourself at some points. And so I've definitely had my eyes opened in that way, but it's also been an opportunity for growth for me to become more confident in what I have to offer, as well as to help others to see that Black people can be great too.
That is to speak to your point about being from HBCU. I went to Alcorn State University, and I agree, being in that cocoon when everyone looks like you and kind of nurturing and pouring into you. Do you feel like that laid a foundation, though, even though you've gone out into the world, that you feel like I am enough, I am equipped, I got this,
Exactly.
We're in the White House.
Exactly.
And do you feel like it helped in that sense, just that foundation in the HBCU?
It definitely does, because you always have that to reflect on, and to remind you, even if in the world, you begin to forget when you come against certain things, you always have that to look back on and be like, this is who I am, this is who I've always been, and kind of coach yourself along the way, despite the things that the world may be telling you about yourself or the assumptions you see when you look into someone else's eyes.
Yeah. And I know, Nikita, you went to Cornell, which was nothing like, it was completely different, very non-traditional undergrad. So how was that in navigating through medical school?
Yeah, so I went to Cornell College, very small liberal arts college in Iowa, the middle of nowhere, predominantly white institution. But one of the things someone mentioned to me that I didn't quite understand while I was in college, they was like, because you chose to go to a WPI, you will have an easier time making that transition to medical school and then into your medical profession. And I was like, what does that mean? But the person who said that was someone who went to a HBCU. And so they were saying I was in an environment that would look like the demographic of the profession that I'm going into, which is predominantly white. And so it may be easier for me to continue that since all of my schooling has been in that environment. But at that time, I didn't quite understand, but now I can see how people who go to a HBCU, they can see themselves in their leaders and their teachers, and they can see that encouragement and have that sense of pride that's very different than when they come out of that. And so I think that's what that person was trying to talk about, in the sense of I was already learning in an environment that will continue to unfortunately be the same, when I go into my profession. One of the things that I actually took out of college was how to be unapologetically me. Because I am a Chicagoan, West Side person.
Sorry.
But when I went to college, they didn't have the stuff that I found value in. And so it was people who would say, hey, we're used to having this, we're used to having that. Well, we're going to bring it here. We like stepping, we're going to bring it here. We like cultural shows, we're going to bring it here. You look at me strangely about my hair every time I'm in the bathroom doing my hair. I'm going to teach you about that. I'm going to give you an opportunity to like learn what it is about Black, and then have a panel like this and see how different we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt that I actually became a more proud Black person in a predominantly white institution, because now it wasn't my default, it was something I had to work to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so having my culture represented where I'm at, I had to do it because I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, went to a very diverse high school, so it was just part of what you do. But then when I come to a place that didn't have it, then it's like I have to bring what I want here. And so then I actually was like, oh, I actually feel Blacker now because I brought my uniqueness to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And organizations that I started are still happening because I didn't feel represented, and some of my peers didn't feel represented there, so we brought our representation there. So I really found that to be the highlight of my time there.
But that speaks to representation and how important it is, and I think that's what he was trying to tell you. So even like going on awards and floors and dealing with patients, how do you feel like being just unapologetically being there, how do you feel like that affects your patients?
I feel like my patients actually value it because when I was in training, so I just finished my fellowship. I'll be finishing my fellowship in 2021. I graduated from residency in 2019. But I felt that after a patient interaction, especially if it was with a Black person, they will always stop me for 2 seconds, be like, I'm so proud of you. You're doing well.
Oh my God.
They will always just like give you that sideline encouragement before you finish with your day. And I think it was their way of like, I see you and I'm proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing, and then bring people along with you. So to me, that was always very encouraging, just to have like those sideline conversations after the clinical conversation to get that sense of encouragement.
Because it's so needed. You really do feel needed because patients really need to see and feel like somebody really cares. Because we've been very marginalized in medicine. So even speaking to that, our comrade who currently passed away, who had COVID in a hospital. So how do you guys feel about that particular situation and just how we're treated in medicine, I would say?
So my answer is going to be a little long-winded.
Go ahead.
I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we know gynecology the way that we do is because of the exploitation of African American slaves. However, despite that knowledge being gained off of my ancestors, my population have the worst outcomes in gynecology. From
the worst.
Gynecological cancers, from obstetrical care, and different things like that. So when I think about what people have learned off the backs of people who look like me, it makes it harder to accept that medicine still hasn't chosen to rectify that wrong and to improve the outcomes of that demographic. So not only was she a Black woman who her ancestors is the reason why we know as much as we do in medicine, but then the other twist of it is she was a clinician, and her ability to advocate for herself wasn't enough because the system is paralyzing. And so if we don't address the system, then we're going to continue to have senseless death, because her death was senseless. And that is the issue. People can say, this demographic have higher diabetes, they have higher rates of asthma, they have higher rates of hypertension. But it is the paralyzing system of racism that are causing people to die disproportionately. And that is the true thing that needs to be attacked.
And it's the system of race, the same system of racism that explains not only just the fact that we die disproportionately from these diseases, but the fact that the disparity, the overrepresentation of hypertension, of diabetes, all these things in our communities is a direct result of racism. the health that we have is a result of where we live, where we play, where we work, and where we have historically been living, working, and playing has been unequal to that of other populations, which is why we, one, are having to deal with chronic diseases at a level that other populations are not having to deal with. And on top of that, the system is built in such a way that the care that we receive once we find ourselves in these positions is suboptimal. And when we think about Dr. Susan Moore, you know, like she said, had she been white, her concerns would have been taken more seriously. Had she been white, people would have been more prompt in providing some type of adequate, you know, medication for her pain, or even just the level of disrespect that she was met with. And it's sad that we are so upset and outraged about the fact that she is a physician who is facing this type of racism, when the fact is, why should we have titles to earn our humanity? We should not have to be physicians or lawyers or the most educated person to be looked upon as a human being equal and deserving of all the respect as anyone else with any other skin color. And so yes, it's outrageous because yes, what do we have to do to be looked at as a full human? But at the same time, why do we have to do so much to be looked at as human is even more disturbing.
Wow. That's so true. I can't say anything else, but that was well said. Mm-hmm. That was well said. Notice that Spellman coming out of you.
No, but again, it's just like, I know when I was a medical student, taking some like cultural competency elective course, and then learning that for most demographics, education improves your health outcomes, but then as a Black woman, it does not. In some scenarios, actually makes it worse. And so there is a larger thing that has to be dealt with. And when you're part of that marginalized group, you know it's racism. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people who have the privilege of not acknowledging racism don't understand how racism kills. And I felt like with Dr. Moore's example, that's how racism kills. Because people are not taken seriously just based off of how they look. And so her race did not kill her, somebody's racism killed her. Mm-hmm. And so it is a public health issue, and it should be addressed as such.
So since we have everyone at different levels of education, so to speak, what can we do going forward? Whether it be educating our colleagues, making sure that we hold our colleagues accountable. Because I feel like a lot of times we see things, we hear things, we feel things. And especially as a medical student, as a resident, you kind of just like, I didn't like that. This is not right. Or you trying to go back in and kind of help the patient understand what's going on because you feel like people are talking at them as opposed to them, and you see how they act in that other room, but then you in a room with a patient that look like you, and you're like, you didn't talk to this patient like this. Mm-hmm. So what can we do at our particular level to help in regards to this?
So one of the things that I feel that for people who are earlier in the process, they are going to feel a little disempowered because there is a hierarchy in medicine. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that one of the things I felt like I've always kind of looked at was, if this bothers my soul, I have to say something. Yeah. So I may not know the exact way or who exactly, but I'm going to find that person to talk to that I trust. I felt fortunate enough that I have been in institutions where diversity matters, and that having those conversations actually has been enriching and actually has been possible. But I know that some people are in more polarized institution, and so they can never dare think about having those conversations because it won't be well received. But I feel like anything that troubles your spirit enough, you have to say something. And so finding that person that you can trust to figure out where to start that conversation, whether if you feel like a powerless medical student because the hierarchy above you, grades and things like that, then talking to your peers or figuring out, hey, how can I find a way to advocate for patients? Do we create some student advocacy groups? So then it's not like a pressure waving on you, but you creating a structure to kind of help streamline these things, and so that you don't feel like your direct efforts is going to penalize your grades or things like that, but you create some type of system. Or, you know, if you are a resident or a fellow, like, you actually have more of a powerful voice than you think you do. And so if it stirs up your spirit, then you should use that power that you have, even if you're not aware of it, to talk about these things, because it is important for people to be aware, because sometimes it's ignorance and people don't realize what they're saying can be, you know, prejudice, racism, things like that. Sometimes it's blatant and they actually know what they're doing. But I feel like the reason why admissions say we need to diversify our medical force is because we need to improve health outcomes. So we need to tell admissions and our higher ups, the CEOs, well, this is what you say we need to do. Let's actually do it. So let's actually not only diversify our workforce, but then make it a requirement that we teach people who have to deal with diverse patients how to do it. Because if I am a black female and not only represent a small percentage of the workforce, I can't take care of all the black women in medicine who got a gynecological obstetric needs. So it is not just teaching other colleagues about, you know, inclusion and just to check something off. Like, no, we need to be doing chart reviews. How did racism show up in your work today? How did prejudice show up in your work today? Call it out, because we have to do better. If we had a death, we will be doing a review. Why did that death happen? If you can't explain it clinically, what biases, what implicit biases do people have that is showing up in their work?
Exactly. I agree with all of that, and I think those are some excellent points. And even just thinking, like, I guess starting from a medical student standpoint, I think it's very important, because I feel for so many years we have been screaming like, we matter, our lives matter, our needs matter, our populations matter, look at the health disparities. I feel like we also have to rope in allies. Like, the kind of response that we got from, and I hate that it took someone like, you know, what happened to George Floyd to get everyone's attention, but seeing that in a very plain and clear as day kind of like stirred up other parts of the population who normally can't afford to ignore the fact that we are not being treated as equal. So I feel like there's a huge role that having allies can play, whether that be as medical student groups or in the admissions committee. If you are in those positions, leverage those relationships to help to bring diversity to the medical school, to the medical school faculty, to the residents you're bringing in, and all of those kinds of things. And then even thinking about, I guess, a patient perspective, I think with that, we really need to work on, I think, just representation, having more black people in medicine in general. And I think that really starts with addressing the structure of how we get people into medical school and how we're educating people in primary, you know, at the earlier levels of education. But yeah, hopefully those kinds of things would make a difference.
No, I feel representation is very important. I feel like a lot of times, even when we finally get there, right? We finally get to medical school and we're finally there. A lot of times we don't have colleagues in positions of power who are the CEO of the hospital, things of that nature, who can definitely push these different legislations in the hospital forward. So I think too, once we get to these positions, it's very important to start branching out and looking at what other opportunities are available to us, because we kind of just stick in our lane, like, I'm not going to do anything else. And I'm irreparable, and I'm just going to stick in this lane instead of just branching out and seeing what all these leadership possibilities and opportunities are out there for us.
I feel like that's where the gold is.
Yeah.
Like, you get in those leadership positions. Yeah.
I remember my medical director, he would always say, never say no to anything. And a lot of times we're like, I can't do that. I don't know if I should be, I don't know if I'm qualified to do it. If you were asked, attempt. Because you don't know what that door, that'll open to that door, to that door, to that door. So it's very important to say that it was put in your lap. You are equipped. And once again, going back into that, I am enough. I made it here.
Exactly.
I'm more than qualified. I can do it all.
Exactly.
May not want to do it all, but I can do it all. So it's very important to put that in there.